Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to this, the fifth intellectual death match of the Convo Debate Society, hosted here on the Constitute Noise Network, hilariously shortened to #CNN. I'm Socrates the Younger, and today I'll be joined by my normal debate partner, Eric Barnard, host of the Free Speech Zone, to which you can find a link in the description of this video, and we will be debating the topic, does Kamala Harris represent a threat to Joe Biden's front-runner status in the Democratic primaries? I will be taking the pro side, arguing that she does indeed represent a threat, while Mr. Barnard will be taking the con side, arguing that she does not, and that Mr. Biden is indeed safe. So, let's watch the debate and see what happens. To understand what's going on in the current primary, we have to go all the way back to 2016, when Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton were both vying for the Democratic nomination. Now, Bernie Sanders was rated after the primaries were over with as possibly the most popular politician in the United States of America, but he still couldn't beat Hillary in the primaries. Now, if you look at places, or if you go to the far right or to the far left, there are plenty of conspiracy theories that say that the Democratic National Committee actually rigged the primaries so that Hillary Clinton would definitely be the nominee because she was the establishment favorite. But even if you don't go in for conspiracy theory, it's still, and even Elizabeth Warren said this to, I believe, to Vox, either that or Vox was quoting somebody else, but she said there was definitely bias there. And that tells us something very important about the Democratic Party. They rely on, the black vote and the Latino vote and the LGBTQIA2S vote, but there's another very important constituency, and that is the establishment. Those are the people that are behind closed doors in cushy chairs eating salmon off of toothpicks, the ones who give huge amounts of money, the ones that Bernie Sanders prides himself on not catering to. And ultimately, they're the ones who really decide who the nominee is going to be. They're not going to let somebody they don't like become the nominee. And so far, until recently, Biden was their favorite. By default, he was the anyone but Trump candidate, the return to normalcy candidate. But after this debate last week, Kamala Harris established herself as perhaps the best alternative to Donald Trump, and certainly a great alternative to Bernie Sanders as far as the establishment within the Democratic Party and the Democratic National Committee is concerned. And I'm talking about the bigwigs here. Reason being is this. Kamala Harris came out, and she is obviously an excellent politician. She is obviously aggressive. She wins the diversity contest, being both black and female. And I think that as a result of her performance at the Democratic debate, that served as kind of an audition tape for her, for the big party players within the Democratic Party, and that she will ultimately become the viable alternative to Biden. And because she has specific things distinguishing her, even though it's only race and gender really, and having very sharp teeth, she will ultimately eclipse Biden, or at least has a chance of eclipsing Biden, who's really the only thing that recommends Biden as far as the public at large and the Democratic establishment is concerned is that he's not Donald Trump and that he's a reasonable, more or less mainstream Democratic politician. But as soon as a viable alternative becomes available, I think that Biden's support has a very good chance of collapsing like a house of cards. Because really, the only thing that his candidacy rests on right now is the fact that he's not Donald Trump, and the fact that he's a relatively popular, relatively well-known politician who starts out way ahead of the game with his household recognition, or household name recognition.
Thank you for doing this again, Socrates. I really appreciate it. I'm here in defense of Vice President Joe Biden and his quest to become the nominee of the Democratic Party. The attacks leveled against the Vice President by Senator Harris are baseless, they are a lie, and they are nothing more than a desperate attempt by a candidate who has no plan, no base, and no real chance of winning a general election to try and bring down the candidate most likely to defeat Donald Trump. The key to unravel the lies that Harris spoke at the debate is the fact that the first African American ever to win the presidency, Barack Obama, chose Biden as his running mate twice. That would never happen if Biden was in fact the racist that Harris implied that he is. Biden has nearly 4 decades of experience in successfully advancing progressive policies, including healthcare reform, better environmental protections, tougher regulations on Wall Street, marriage equality, and getting assault weapons banned, all of which was done in a bipartisan way. And my final comment here is that Harris committed blatant hypocrisy at the debate the other night when she chastised all of her fellow candidates, when she said Americans don't want to see a food fight, they want to know how we're going to put food on their table, and she turned around and immediately throws egg on Biden's face. How can the Democrats win with such a candidate? The fact is, they can't. The sooner the Democrats wise up to the fact, the better off they're going to be in trying to get the right candidate to be their nominee who can win a general election and defeat Donald Trump. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
Now, you've made an interesting point, or several interesting points, and there's probably a lot to that. I'm sure that I'm sure, but it is well-known fact that Biden's record is actually pretty good as far as his senatorial career goes. And he has indeed been in the Senate for a very long time. And it is probably also the case that Harris was committing a bit of a hypocrisy when she told everybody to stop food fighting and then turned to, as you put it, throw egg on Biden's face. But ultimately, that's neither here nor there. It's ultimately aside the point. Because what we're really looking at here is not what the truth is, so to speak, at least as far as you and I can ascertain it. What we're really looking at is what is the average American voter going to think? You got to keep in mind that after that debate, whatever you may think here of Harris's performance, she raised $2 million in 24 hours. That's a big deal, considering the fact that Biden's campaign has only raised $21 million this entire quarter. And he hasn't even been in the campaigns since, he only entered the campaign this quarter. So the man's raised $21 million the whole time. Kamala Harris raises 10% of that in one day, just based on that performance. Apparently, the American people like the fact that she was throwing egg on Biden's face. They like the fact that she went after him for his supposedly segregationist past. Even if that past is complete fabrication, it seems to me that it really is the case that Harris is resonating with not only the American people, but with a group of people who matter far more than that, and that is the Democratic establishment. Kamala Harris doesn't stand for any particular set of principles. She stands for acquiring her own power, and she's willing to trade specific policy proposals or specific policies in general for the chance to gain more personal power. And as such, that makes her exactly what the Democratic establishment is looking for. And ultimately, if she establishes herself as a viable alternative, they're going to abandon Biden and leave him behind, and there won't be much that can save him.
All right, you gave a lot to chew on right there. But the fact of the matter is, this election is about the future. This election is not about the past. And 4 decades of a career pushing progressive policies that I outlaid in my opening statement: assault weapons bans, environmental protection, regulation of Wall Street, fighting for a living wage for the working families, and for getting marriage equality, being the first highly elected official to come out in support of gay marriage. That distinguishes Biden as someone who's not very much establishment. Because at the time when Biden came out for marriage equality from gays and lesbians, the National Democratic Party didn't have a platform on that. In fact, his boss, Barack Obama, had stated that he felt that marriage was between a man and a woman. Hillary Clinton said the same thing. So Biden has distinguished himself, and he has stood up to his party when they need to be stood up to. Biden is very much anti-establishment. 4 decades will show you that. And he went for progressive policies when they were not popular. And he did the right thing when it was probably better to do something opposite. He fought for better criminal justice reform. He fought to get assault weapons off the street for more police officers. And all the time while Joe Biden was doing this, Kamala Harris was a person who might be good at a debate, might get her $2 million in this quarter, but the fact of the matter is Kamala Harris is still the former prosecutor and the former attorney general who prosecuted innocent people, put them in prison, and then when they were proven innocent, fought to keep them in prison, not to get them out faster. And nobody brings that part up because if you do, apparently you're a racist. And that just seems to be the way of trying to win in this day and age. You pick the most divisive topic and you go through someone's past and you find the one thing it's going to be hard to defend, and then they hang that around your neck hoping that it sinks you. So that way you will be the one that gets rescued and get picked to be the nominee. And it's really despicable, and it speaks to her character. And I challenge her courage to actually go out there and actually try to actually debate the issues, debate how you're going to put food on the American people's table, rather than picking up an egg and throwing it on the candidate's face simply because you don't know, you have nothing to defend.
Okay, so 4 decades of time in the Senate aside, and Kamala Harris's time as California Attorney General aside, just based solely on debate performance, has Biden really shown or really distinguished himself on any particular personality or policy topic whatsoever?
I'll answer that. I'll answer that this way. I think Biden in the first debate came out there and he kind of looked how most incumbents look. And if you recall, Barack Obama didn't look very good in his first debate against Mitt Romney. George Bush didn't look very good in his debate against John Kerry. Ronald Reagan didn't look good in his debate against Walter Mondale. That happens. But again, when it comes to personality, Biden is a sound debater. Biden has debated every day for 4 decades, if you count his time in the U.S. Senate. You count the campaigns he's run for president himself, 3 different occasions. The man knows how to debate. And I think the people know his record. They know him. And Biden has gotten more support, more diverse support than anybody else in this primary field. Bernie Sanders hasn't gotten any major endorsements. Kamala Harris hasn't gotten any major endorsements. Cory Booker hasn't. Elizabeth Warren hasn't. Biden is getting not just money, he's getting support. People know him. And I think that's what's going to matter. And that's what's going to help him to actually win this nomination. And I think people are going to see through these scurrilous attacks and they're going to realize, hey, does this matter? Or is this election really about the future? And that's all the time I have. So my first question to you is, the first African American woman ever elected to the U.S. Senate, Carol Moseley Braun of Illinois, said that Senator Harris, quote, got it wrong, and that Biden is the best there is, and for her to take that tack is really sad. So how does Harris overcome the criticism from people like Senator Braun and unite the party, if indeed she's going to be the nominee, to beat Trump?
Well, fundamentally, there's a couple different things going on. First of all, she may be entirely right. It may have been a sad idea to attack Biden based on that. It may have been a low blow, the equivalent of hitting someone in the testicles on a debate stage. But at the same time, it resonated with people. People watching that debate. Harris received a bump and Biden fell in the polls immediately after the debate. So regardless of what we may think of Harris's behavior, with the people who were ultimately going to be checking boxes in the Democratic primary, it worked with at least some of them. So fundamentally, what we have to look at here is not the deeper issues, not the deeper reality behind the surface, but the surface itself, because the surface itself is what's going to determine how people are going to vote. And fundamentally, if Kamala Harris ultimately did become the nominee, she would probably tack to the center, just like every other nominee does, as always. They start out way off in the wings of their party, and then they move to the center when it's time to unite everyone. And I'm sure that everybody would end up voting for her just because she wasn't Trump, even if they didn't actually like her. All right. So my next question is this. The fundamentally, in the history of the Democratic Party, the black vote has been absolutely fundamental to not only the primary, but also the general election. Do you really think that Biden will be able to get black voters out to the polls when it comes to the general election the same way Kamala Harris, a black woman, will be able to?
Yes, I think he'll be able to get black people out to the polls. I think he'll get Latino voters back to the polls, and most importantly, he'll get the working class back out to the polls. And the working class, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Latino, male or female. The fact of the matter is, Biden was the vice president to the first African American president. This is a man who has fought for equal protections for gays and lesbians, fought for hate crime legislation, person that fought to expand voting rights and the Equal Rights Amendment. I believe that Biden will be seen as the clear frontrunner to defeat Donald Trump, to win back those states that the Democrats have to win, the Pennsylvanias, the Ohios, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, the Minnesotans, and the Floridians and the North Carolinians. And if they do that, then they'll win a general election, and then they're back in the White House. And I think the voters care more about winning the White House back as opposed to about the past. And if you're running a campaign that's based solely on the past, then how can you dare represent the future? My second question to you is I alluded to this in my opening statement. Harris declares herself as the champion for criminal justice reform, yet during her time as a prosecutor and as Attorney General of California, she oversaw the prosecution of people who were later found to be innocent, and she fought to keep them in prison. Where is the shame in that, and what does that say about her judgment?
Well, I think you kind of answered your own question there when you said, where's the shame in that? And what that really speaks to is not so much her judgment, but her utter lack of shame. And it is her utter lack of shame, in fact, that makes her an excellent politician. We saw during the debates how she was willing to bring up story after story of these individual people to try and personalize. It was like watching a courtroom drama on some kind of soap opera or something. Like, she is not afraid to tug at heartstrings very cynically, mind you. I'm not saying that she actually believes any of this stuff. She's just saying whatever's going to get her a round of applause. I almost guarantee you, I would bet my next paycheck that we're not here for a food fight, we're here to put food on the table line was practiced and rehearsed and written 6 months ago. She was just waiting for the opportunity to use it. And that characterizes her entire campaign. She's going to say whatever it takes to get ahead. The problem, and probably the reason why she's a threat to Biden, is because she's really good at it. All right, and then my final question to you is this. Joe Biden has run for president twice before, and both times he has lost. What is different now that you think he'll actually be able to win?
You know, fundamentally, the first time when he ran, he was like Kamala Harris. He was like Elizabeth Warren. He was like Cory Booker. He had not distinguished himself that much. He was a young guy, first time running, made some mistakes, and there were more established candidates that were ahead of him. And so that's why he lost. The second time around, it was just a matter of, once again, he was up against establishment people. He was up against Hillary Clinton, and he was up against Barack Obama, who was very inspirational and was getting a lot of attention. And that's hard to do. In this day and age, there's not a Hillary Clinton, there's not a Barack Obama. This is pretty much an open field. And him coming off being the vice president, being in the American people's homes for 8 years, American people seeing him run two general election campaigns and debating soundly, I think that he has those abilities. And when you look at his ability to garner as much support as he's been getting, to raise $21 million pretty much right off the bat, I think that goes to show him that this is not like the first two campaigns. And I think that he has the chance to win a general election, and I think he has the chance to do better. And we'll see what happens over the course of the next few months. So my final question to you is this. Race is without a doubt the most divisive issue in our politics. How does a candidate win the nomination of the party that got the Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Act enacted into law? How are they going to win the nomination of that party? By smearing and slandering her opponents. Barack Obama didn't do this.
The way I would answer that is this. Fundamentally, smearing and slandering your opponents and what race you are or what race you appeal to are very different, because appealing to someone by slandering people has nothing to do with what race you are. White people are not more likely to enjoy and support a slandering candidate than are black people. And that goes not only for race, but also for gender and, pretty much everybody. It's just a personality trait. Some people like watching people sling mud at each other. A lot of those people ended up voting for Donald Trump, if you recall 2016. And a lot of people prefer candidates that are staid and stolid and, I did this and I did that, and here are the actual issues, and let's talk seriously and have a frank, reasonable discussion. The problem is that those people don't tend to attract the eyeballs the way candidates who put on a circus do. So on the one hand, you have the fact that Kamala Harris is black, which is going to get out the black vote undoubtedly and lets her win the diversity wars. Secondly, she's willing to slander her opponents, which creates a circus, just like Donald Trump. What we have to understand is that this is the woke age. This is the age of racial politics, of gender politics, of sexual politics, like no age before it. Those factors are going to play a huge role in who ultimately gets the nomination and who ultimately takes the White House. And Kamala Harris actually has a pretty good report card when it comes to those things. She is a black woman. She beats Hillary Clinton and she beats Barack Obama. She beats Barack Obama because she's female, and she beats Hillary Clinton because she's a minority. Joe Biden, on the other hand, looks very much like exactly what he is, which is an old white man. And it's very easy to accuse him of things like racism or even of implying that he's a segregationist because he said nice things about men who openly were segregationists. Now, if we're being honest, the real truth is that at the time he had to work with such individuals because those were the other people that happened to be in Congress. That's not really what the point is here, though. The point is that he looks like an old white man. He looks like, if you wanted to say he's an old racist white man, you'd be 2/3 right, because he is old and he is white. And so it's very easy to make those accusations about him, and they tend to resonate with people, especially people who are coming off of 4 years, well, I guess 2.5 years at this point, of Donald Trump, who very much does fit the bill of old racist white man. And so it's very easy to say that the American people, specifically left-leaning American people, even more specifically, left-leaning American people who fall outside of that traditional, white, straight, male, or at least male-dominant culture, are going to go for somebody like Harris, who is not only one of them, so to speak, but acts aggressively towards people who are not, or at least who she paints as being not like that. So, as far as I can tell, Harris absolutely killed her audition tape, and for that reason she's going to start attracting the attention, more so than she has already, of the people in the establishment at the very top of the Democratic Party. And that means more fundraising, that means endorsements are coming, and it means that fundamentally she's going to represent a viable alternative to Biden, the same way that Elizabeth Warren currently represents a viable alternative to Bernie Sanders. The difference here is that people like Warren and Sanders tend to prefer small donations from large numbers of people, whereas people like Harris and Biden are primarily taking money from large-scale donors. So if those large-scale donors see a viable alternative to Biden, who, again, his only distinguishing characteristic is his long-term experience. As soon as another viable candidate appears, especially one as aggressive and winning on the diversity report card as Kamala Harris, Biden's support will crumble like a house of cards. He is the Jeb Bush of 2020, and Kamala Harris just might trump him.
Well, Socrates, once again, thank you for a good debate, and I look forward to the next ones we're going to have in the future. To all the Democratic primary voters out there, you have a choice to make. There are 25 candidates running for the party's nomination, and the question is, which one of them can defeat Donald Trump? You may not agree with anything that I have said in this debate today, and that really doesn't matter. The future of our country is at stake. The fact is, Kamala Harris is not Barack Obama, and her actions in this campaign bear that out. Her attacks are a desperate attempt to save a campaign plagued by the absence of a plan to fix health care, to raise the wages of working families, to reform our judicial system, and the list can go on and on and on. Joe Biden's record was good enough to earn him the selection as vice president by the first African-American president. He was the highest federal official in elective office to come out in favor of same-sex marriage. He has a record of getting progressive policies supported, passed, and enacted into law. He's made mistakes, but again, who hasn't? But this election is about the future. It's not about the past. And it's time for a president who is qualified to hold the office. And the only candidate who is ready to go into the Oval Office on January 20th, 2021, and to get everything going is no doubt right now Joe Biden. And people can say, "Oh, Harris is, is cool. Harris is a woman. Harris can do what Hillary Clinton could not do." They can use those arguments, but the facts again bear it out. This is a woman who has very little experience. This is a woman who is not working in a bipartisan manner. This is a woman who goes out and says they don't want a food fight. They want us to put food on their table, and then she throws egg on the face of all her fellow candidates. So you have a hypocrite, you have a slanderer, and you have someone who is acting more or less like Donald Trump. And it's really sad that the party of Kennedy, the party of Clinton, the party of Obama has to, take a card from the Trump deck and has to play it. And if that's the best you've got, then I feel really bad for this party. And I feel real bad for what future it's going to have if indeed Kamala Harris is going to lead it into the 2020 general election against Donald Trump. So to all the voters out there, it's your choice. No, the future is at hand. Who do you want in your living room for 4 more years? Do you want Donald Trump, or do you want Joe Biden? And I think if you want to make the safe bet, and you can even take safe off there, you just want to make the right decision, vote for Joe Biden. And I'll cede the rest of my time.
Well, that was our debate for this week. I hope you found our repartee both enlightening and titillating in all the right proportions. Feel free to use the comment section below to let us know who you think won, and of course to suggest future debates for future weeks. If you enjoyed this, feel free to subscribe to our channel and you'll receive all of our future debates, hopefully some of which will include your suggestions. Furthermore, you can find in the description of this video our page on Medium, where you can read some of the core principles that motivate us as an organization, as well as some of the more interesting opinions of our more dedicated members. You can also find our ever-jingling online change cup at patreon.com, to which we appreciate all of your generous contributions. And of course, you can join us for a live in-person meetup, where you can take the opportunity to slap the table and tell someone they're destroying America on meetup.com. Anyway, that's all we have for right now. We hope to see you next week. Thank you very much for joining us.